You're tuned into the Borth podcast, the place where clarity replaces confusion and real conversations open new doors for your financial life. Let's dive in and rethink what's possible. Hello, welcome back to the Borth podcast. Today, we're going to continue on our series to talk about what we call 12 ideas for tough money mastery, because I think it's important that we have some basic understanding, but now what do we do? Let's find some mastery in this concept. And I invited David Zapata back on our podcast today. So thank you, David. I appreciate you coming back on with me. As always, it's a pleasure having these conversations with you. So thank you again for joining us.
Always a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, Wade.
So today we started part one. We picked 4 areas that we talked about. And if you're watching on YouTube, we'll have those listed out. But we talked about these 4 ideas previously. That's part 1. And then we're going to talk about in this series a little bit more like how do we build capital? How do we build our assets? We have an understanding of what the path of money looks like. We agree that, hey, savings are important. But now, how does it impact our lives? And how do we find the greatest impact of how do we use our money? So it is more than a surface level conversation, but it really can impact everybody that has saved money and can benefit from the use of stored money. Now we stored it, what do we do with it? And that's really where we're going to dig into today a little bit more. So David, I'm going to let you kick it off with some introductions about these ideas, because you've been leading this conversation about tough money. Are we doing what's right with our dollars in order to put us in a position to, A, when an event happens, protect ourselves? But now the other thing is, what do we do to take advantage of opportunities? And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And it's always come back to protection first. Because you think about it, how many people were wiped out in all the events, the financial events that happened? So if we can first protect ourselves, have enough dollars, have a good position to protect ourselves, and now let's take advantage from opportunities that come our way. And that's the true essence of tough money.
The premise of this community is that you have to come up with a business plan that allows you to accumulate $50 million in net worth in the next 30 years. And the habit here is they're going to track their net worth on a monthly basis, and they're going to put a forward plan by saying, I'm going to acquire this many assets, this many businesses, this many loans, properties, etc. And as I see the projections of growth in valuation, this should get me to my desired goal in the next 30 years. And I was teaching them some tough money principles, some foundations conversation. And I was asking them the question, hey, if you were to look in hindsight at the end of this period, what you would have to do to double, triple, quadruple your net worth, what do you think would be the actions you need to take at the beginning and throughout this process to accomplish that? And the answers I hear are, oh my God, I would have to increase my income X. I would have to either save most of it, 50%, 60%. I would have to live on rice and beans way, right? And it's fascinating to me because in the absence of a framework or models or tools to visualize what the changes really need to be and the impact of small changes over a long period of time is, you will think of extreme things. And the exercise I was presenting to them was, hey, what if you got more efficient in your taxes, maybe 10% this year? What if you reduce your low value spending 10%? What if you maybe reduce your debt or found a more efficient way to use something like whole life insurance or tough money principles to manage your debt, source your debt, and redirect a lot of that interest to your life? Those little changes quadrupled the result that I was showing them in the example. And it was shocking for them because they realized, my God, I've been avoiding financial management and getting close to my money because it seemed so daunting and it seemed like I had to do things that I'm not willing to do right now. But it is very interesting that little changes, little adjustments, intentional changes created such dramatic results. So I give you that as context because it's been in my mind all day. And the conversation we're having today is about the 12 ideas we've gathered for this series of podcasts on how to implement tough money mastery. Now that I value and understand financial management is really important, right? We make crazy amounts of income. We're not keeping a lot of it as a nation. We're not valuing liquidity. What if we implement these principles of developing tough money and then we deploy them into practical applications in our life? Yeah. People typically get excited of talking and thinking about the outcomes becoming real, not the process. We typically tell them, hey, we'll talk about the outcomes, we'll show you, but do not dismiss the value of small action consistently applied in your life for maximizing the results you want in the future.
Yeah, you make a really good point. In order to make quantum leap improvements in your life or 10x your business, all the different books that are out there, what the founding principles between all those are, You can't work to 10x your business. You can't work 10 times as hard, but you can find maybe 10 times ways to work smarter, right? Or have your money work smarter, right? So think about this as like, hey, this is some of that 10xing for your business. What's the proper sequence? Because again, you can't work harder than you're currently working or making more, because then you probably would be doing it.
And a lot of times, think about my real scenario. A lot of times it's not just working hard, but a lot of times we are in situations where we've picked a profession or we've picked an environment that we like what we do, that doesn't have the potential to double and triple our income in the next 2, 3, 5 years. But some people love what they do and I don't want to quit my job. I don't want to quit my career. They love what they do. So what do we expect out of these people if they don't have that opportunity necessarily to radically change their income? Well, what if we reframe the problem? Maybe it is not that you need to go and quit that and completely start a business or a new career. What if you are sitting on the seats that have the opportunity to build what you actually want to build, but just getting a little more intentional?
100%. And then now being more intentional about your conversation around tough money. It's that close relationship with your money. And once you have a close relationship, you'll know what it can do for you. Once you open your mind up to imagination, most of the solutions that are there have yet to be presented to you, or maybe have been presented, but you weren't in a position to even think about it. And so this is just that. It's like, open your mind up. I'd say suspend disbelief of like, can this work for you? I'd say it absolutely can. Put some imagination to it, because this is the time and the opportunity to say, hey, we have the ability to have our money work at a much faster pace than we could ever imagine it working. And that's really what we're talking about. Owning real estate and property. It's not something I would do. 10 years ago, I wasn't in the position to think about it, but now I am. So now these are all relevant to what we can do. So again, it's about controlling the path of money, understanding that, leaning into it, exploding that idea of, hey, we need to save. And once you save some dollars, now how do we put this thing to work in a much more efficient manner? So let's get into it, David. I appreciate that thought process and that setup.
Absolutely. Well, let's do a little bit of recap of what we talked about in the last episode. And maybe in order to create these ideas, the way we thought about this, Wade, when we were coming up with this list was, hey, what if we think in terms of what are the outcomes that come from merging your financial area of life with every other area around the 5 areas? In the last episode, we had a couple of conversations, 1 through 4, building a family bank business, how to keep $1 million in your control when buying vehicles. Everyone is going to buy vehicles, including your children. So what if you're the financier of those? What about debt? Debt sourcing, behaving like a bank, those type of thought process. It's a very popular conversation. That is one of the most sensitive conversations around finances and personal finances in families today. These are topics that people want to get clear about how they're going to accomplish those goals in the next 2, 5, 10 years. And Tough Money Mastery brings them the opportunity to create some of these tough money principles and deploy them in these particular examples. Today, in this episode, we're going to take it to a different area. And we're going to think about how the financial area of life connects with your occupation or the way you serve your community. We may be employed or self-employed. We may have a business. We may be an investor. But the reality is that if you think about Tough Money Mastery and Tough Money principles in these areas, you may be a person that through your work or through money are making investments to either have equity in a business, equity in a property or a rental, equity in an endeavor that creates some type of result or returns to you. So that first topic we're going to review is how to supercharge those investments using Tough Money principles. But what if you're actually on the debt side of things? What if you're providing liquidity for somebody to borrow money from you to go and do a flip on a real estate property or to buy a business, etc., in the lending space? So that second topic, Wade, will be how to maximize your lending business returns through the Tough Money principles. When it comes to the investment, one of the great frameworks that we've learned from Mr. Gary Keller, the CEO and chair of Keller Williams, the largest realty in the world, is that idea that when it comes to investing, the easiest model to organize your mind around this is this. There's 2 positions. You can either own things or you can lend against things. And from owning or lending, you can do it actively or you can do it passively. Okay. So those 4 positions should organize in 4 clear categories distinctly, things you own and control in your balance sheets from an ownership on lending position, passively or actively.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, the third topic is, hey, what if we take a step back and we don't think about owning other businesses, other properties, or lending against them? But what if we just look inside the armor, right? What if we look at our own business? Our own businesses have need for financing, equipment, vehicles, expenses, capital expenditures, all these things. If you're a business owner, you're hearing us here. What about you creating a vertical stack, just like real estate professionals and other people do with multiple businesses that integrate the supply chain of their ultimate business? What if we start to look at dollars as inventory of your business and how it's serving the purposes of this primary business by starting a second business called the banking business? That's the conversation there. And the last one, which I think is unexpected in most cases, but it is the recognition that part of the tough money principles is to store money in savings environments that maximize our benefits. For us, that means using whole life insurance as a long-term storage of capital, which happens to also protect human capital. Yes, the bloodline of the business is cash. Every single item under that water touches human capital, people that you must retain in your business because they're productive, people that you want to protect against leaving, or if they pass or something happens to them. Human capital is an important conversation for business owners, so that will be the last topic for today, Wayne.
In Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, he talked about cogeneration. And think about this as if we can be using our dollars for one purpose and it can be doing other things for us. That's really that's leverage. In essence, that's how you truly grow wealth. Isn't by working 5 times harder. It's by finding leverage. And again, it's safe leverage because it's not leverage that can get you in trouble. But let's go individually and just start talking about how do you supercharge your investments? Because this is a topic of conversation we get quite a bit. A lot of people think of it as it's either one side of the coin or the other. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of times the true path to wealth is finding how can we have both? What's the and asset? And this is a great opportunity to start talking about that and asset. What can we be doing? And how do we supercharge our investments? No, I don't. I mean, I'll talk to people about their investments just from a conversation. But if somebody says, hey, what is the investment I need to put in? I'm not an investment advisor. But guess what? I can help them find some dollars to say, if they know where they want to go, if they know what's going on and they know where they want to go, hey, we got some ways to finance that investment. So maybe just your take on that, because again, I think some conversation you've had recently kind of lead into that, because there's a lot of doubt, like, oh, this is going to happen or this is going to happen. Back in 2020, I remember the day that oil went negative and it was costing people to own oil back in the day. Oil stocks were tanking. It was just at the head of COVID. And people were like, hey, the price of oil actually went to a negative position where it was actually costing you to own and hold oil.
During COVID recently too.
Yeah. So, and it's like, we need energy, right? So it's like, but there was so much fear in the marketplace. And this is just one simple example. I'm like, hey, what if I take a policy loan, for a small amount, you have certain principles, and say, what if we took 20 grand and we went out and bought a handful of oil stocks and maybe some oil futures, and let's see what happens in the next 3 to 5 years, I thought. Well, it was like 3 to 5 months when people like this, they brought back their sanity. They lost their brains for a second and they go, oh, wait a second. We still have to have oil. We still have to have production. This isn't a doomsday scenario. And all of a sudden, things came back. Now, the return was absolutely ridiculous on those stocks. And so, turn around, sell them, get the profitability back out of it, pay back the policy loans. And now you own an asset that you, in essence, have no money into.
Yeah.
And how valuable is that? Just one simple example of how to supercharge your investments. But again, I'm not saying that that's for everybody, because everybody's investment strategy is going to be different. But it doesn't happen unless you have a foundation of a savings.
Yeah, so many things that you make me think about. I'll share a couple of thoughts there. Like, I think that the conversation and the premise that we should start with is that by no means we're telling people to replace or change their investment strategy whatsoever. We typically use in our industry the expression of an asset or in addition to, because this is the coupling to enhance what you're already doing in your investment strategy, whatever that is. And by the way, Wade and I don't traffic on right or wrong, better or worse. You should, right? We tell people, hey, we observe things common and uncommon, but at the end, an investment strategy should align with your skill set, your competence, your attention, your obsessions, your values, your goals. Wade's strategy is going to look completely different to mine, for example, and it should likely be that the case for everyone. So all we're saying is that in recognition of that uniqueness, the commonality, the things that are the same, is that there is an activity around investing that requires someone to not only supply dollars, but manage the constant flow of that money. We call those people typically bankers. And if you have a third party playing that role for you, there's a reason. They're likely profiting from your investments. And the question is, what if you added away an asset? I would ask everyone to refer to some of our education, whole life insurance as a place to, as an asset and the process to take control of some of that function to support your investing and then profit from that as well. You are going to inevitably enhance the result of such investment strategy. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about risk. I serve a lot of people in the real estate industry, a lot of real estate professionals. And in the real estate world, they will announce their production in terms of volume of transactions they did over a year. Oh, I sold $50 million of real estate, $100 million of real estate. But I ask agents all the time, showed me a P&L where you show $50 million of capital moving through your business. And obviously, agents cannot produce that P&L because the money actually was flowing and the completion of those transactions was flowing through a bank. In order to enhance the results of your investments, you need to zoom out and look at everything that is touching from a transactional perspective, from a management perspective, the flow and profit of your investment. I don't care if you're buying oil or investing in oil. I don't care if you're buying real estate or interest in a business. Doesn't matter. There's multiple parties surrounding this. And the last thing I'll say is the dollars going through that business are part of the inventory of the business, if you look at it. And the people we call managing that level of inventory are called banks. I would argue you, me, and people listening to this at the you and me level can learn and implement how to suffice and provide for that function over time to enhance and maximize the results of their investments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we talk about the flow of money, and I've had previous podcasts, if you want to see the visual, have a conversation, you go back and look at those podcasts. But this idea of like everything that happens from a wealth acceleration or investment side, whatever we want to call it, everything has to flow through savings, David. If it's not, then it puts so much pressure that the system is bound to break. Everything has to flow through savings first. And that's the proper sequence. Think about that. And especially if you have an asset that once it flows through there, it stays there. And then you just use it as leverage to go out and purchase whatever your acceleration asset is.
This is a model that's not ours. It comes from a gentleman, Gary Keller. We teach this in their wealth community at Keller Williams. And the premise here is that when you have cash flow, you can only do four things with that cash flow. You can spend it, donate it, you're going to hold it or invest it. And beyond the fact that there's only four options, the wisdom here is in the sequencing of this path of money, how money trickles. So I bring this up because in the investment conversation, everyone we talk about when we want to do education, the most exciting, sexy conversation is always going to be investing. And it's obvious, right? It's the part that creates the cash flow. It's the part that creates the ultimate result we want here. Our team is focused on helping you build this green box in two ways. How much liquidity you're using to protect and take advantage of opportunity in the future with your family and business, and where are you storing that? That foundational conversation out of those two questions in this diagram intentionally touches what's happening in your P&L so you can keep more of what you're earning, and it touches your investment because it's a cash flow management conversation. The absence of this green box is what we call asset-rich cash poor in the majority of American balance sheets.
Or another really good way to think about it is that's the financial pressure that you feel that keeps you up at night because you don't have enough liquidity. One little bump in the road and all of a sudden, the house of cards falls away.
Every time you're thinking about your investment profile, it doesn't matter. You're buying equities or you have a bond strategy or you're buying real estate for cash flow, whatever it is you're doing, cryptocurrency, remember, you're taking dollars from your savings and financing the acquisition of those assets so you can control them. And what we're suggesting is, hey, before you do that, what if you pass those dollars through an entity, through a contract that you control, so you can remain in control of the growth into the future of those dollars and other benefits that we talk about, and leverage that asset to acquire the same investments that you are going to invest in regardless, and have now two things, the investment and the foundation asset. That is what we call supercharging your investments, because it will be a wheel where you can perform the proper path of money.
I think that's the clarity there. It's like that proper sequence or proper path leads really to a success formula. And I know we're probably going to get into this in the next point, in point number two, but I'm going to set the groundwork for this. And think about this from the standpoint of, hey, I'm going to simplify it in my brain because I'm a simple guy. We're going to go ahead, we're going to bring some income into our lives. We're going to spend it. Hopefully, we're not spending more than what we're bringing in. I mean, that's always the first thing we have to do. We have to learn to save. We're going to donate to our charities, and then we're going to say, okay, we need to save. I think everybody, it is the greatest asset in the world is properly structured whole life insurance. And then once we do that, I think there's maybe even a sliver here, David. Maybe there's room for the sliver in that path of money is like, now let's start a business. Let's start a business before we do anything else. And what business is that going to be that we're already in? Is the banking business. And once we start that banking business, I'm going to put my banker hat on and say, oh, I want to go and invest in cryptocurrency. We hear people talk about OPM, right? Now we're going to be having that same conversation. OPM, but now I'm borrowing from somebody that I know and that I can, have influence over. So it's my banking business buying my cryptocurrencies. That's the first step. That's personal investments. Then we could go on and say, okay, now we have to have other customers because we can't, we're going to have a machine and we can also go out and find the next customers. I'll get in some of the next ideas.
Yeah, I'll pull them up, but just I want to highlight one thing that you said there that language is so powerful. It's fascinating, but you said a business that you already have. I use this analogy to people with my clients to get them to wake up to this reality. I ask them, hey, what's your state plan? And they say, I don't have one. And I tell them, no, you do. You have the default plan that your local state has already decided for you. If you want something outside of that standard, you may have to come up with a state plan yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And you said, oh, you already have a banking business. And I tell people, hey, the same is true for what's happening transactionally at a banking level, controlling the inventory of dollars you own. It's just that you have not realized you have a third party bank playing that role for you. And it's up to you to decide if they continue or you do it yourself.
I'm like, what's the incentive for the banks to tell you?
How much advertisement do you want in big banners from the banks to spend millions of dollars to tell you to get them out of business?
Yeah, exactly. There's a deep pockets to keep it. I don't want to say keep it secret, but there's nobody incentive to say we need to have you understand. Because again, from the standpoint of do they love borrowers and do they love savers? And I would say they love them equally because money's always flowing towards them.
Yeah.
It's out of again, the idea of tough money is like you have a personal relationship with your money. And all we do if we put it in a savings account, a CD, or if we go and we borrow to buy a piece of equipment or an investment, whatever it is, the money always flows back towards Wells Fargo. And I don't know if you've ever heard me say it, David, but you have to love your family more than you love Wells Fargo.
I'm sure Wells Fargo's executives love their family more. They love Wells Fargo. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is a perfect segue to get into the next topic because now that we talk about the lending business, we're talking about the other activity banks are. And I want to make sure that we come out as fair. There's a reason banks are in this position. They are the best entities in the world performing and providing this activity for most people. They are incredible at transactional speed, at volume, at amounts of capital. It takes a lot of work, intention, education to try to recapture and apply some of this. It's not easy. It's not for everyone, let's be honest, Wade. Right? So if the default is working for you and you're happy with your banking relation, there's nothing wrong with that. We're just saying create optionality to strengthen and toughen your money for your family and your business. When it gets to maximizing the lending business returns with tough money strategy, we know a lot of people, especially in this environment of rising interest rates, that have switched from focusing on owning equity in property in businesses to recognizing that at higher interest rates, there's an opportunity to make debt their investment strategy. So they will focus, for example, on having short-term loans or hard money loans in the real estate space, or buying notes and mortgages, or lending to peer loans, lending on second business purpose loans. All these opportunities set you up for the same idea we were sharing before. In the path of money, holding that cash and having gold puts you in a position to talk to your neighbor, talk to your family, talk to someone, say, hey, do you need capital? What if I provided that capital for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I subscribed to an individual who we bought some rental properties through. And it was, remember back in the day, we looked at the rental properties and they're like, hey, you want this property? You want this property? So they had just inventory of property that you would go buy and you would finance through a financier. or whatever it might be. And so I'm still on the mailing list. Our passion is to own individual houses. It's not our passion. We try to, we want to have an understanding of it. It's actually been pretty good to us financially. But the point I was going to make is now I see him as like, hey, here's a $220,000 house for sale. Do you want to buy the note? Own the note. And now they're promoting owning the note. That is the opportunity. If you don't want the headache of it, think about how simple owning the note is, David.
Yeah. There's a reason, again, banks are in this business of providing liquidity, serving savers at the same time they say and they save borrowers. But we teach people in pictures sometimes, and we try to simplify this as much as possible to try to make our points. But, and again, this is now an acceleration conversation. It did not meet your personal criteria, interest, skill set to own 200 doors. Some people thrive on having 1,000, 2,000 doors, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? You cannot argue with a guy like Ken McElroy managing all this property. He loves serving the community that way. And I also think there's people that really enjoy reducing that noise and having smaller staff and maybe just owning and providing the opportunity for people to access a note that maybe a bank wouldn't give them for a mortgage. The point is this: whether your own equity and you're a saver and you have capital or you're borrowing, the point you were making is that when you think about how that money is flowing towards the person controlling the capital, both at the top green or red at the bottom, saver or borrower, keep flowing that money back to the white line source. And over a lifetime of every single financial decision, that money ends up in the hands of the bank.
Well, Wells Fargo loves people that save money, and they love people that borrow money from them equally as well, because the money's always flowing towards them. It's always flowing through their hands.
Yeah. So in this conversation, I can tell you, what if in addition to the lending business you have and financing a lending business from a checking account, let's be honest, what if you finance the lending business from an asset you own and control that had all these benefits? It's, in our opinion, whole life insurance, it's a very powerful way to support a lot of our clients doing hard money loans, note purchasing, by putting the money first through this asset that allows them to control the inventory of dollars forever, maximizing those benefits, and leverage against that to go and acquire those lending relationships. Adding a little bit to your strategy will enhance these results. We even have education in our community where we teach people the mechanics of this. Hey, let me show you what kind of lending you're doing and what's the difference between having that in a high yield savings account versus a life insurance policy. And at the end of the comparison period, you'll see the power of having that money behave in a wealth creator pattern here versus just a saver or a borrower. You mentioned something here. Hey, we got involved. We got a couple properties. Wasn't for us. We still hold one. What's the likelihood that as you create investments or businesses, there is an end to that? If you had a rental property in California and you got exposed to those fires, or your PNC and home insurance rates skyrocketed and kill your cash flow, is there a possibility that business or that investment may not be working and you need to make changes or pulled out of the whole thing? It's not a permanent condition. But what if when you start to do those, you had two businesses at the same time with this one here, the banking business, and that one continues to operate regardless of you ever changing your mind about your investment strategy moving forward for the rest of your life? That level of certainty and continuity and constant growth, it's what gives permission to a lot of investors, a lot of business owners in our community to see an end to the efforts they put into creating these machines.
It's the exit strategy that most people that bring a lot of uncertainty to people's lives. The lack of an exit strategy brings anxiety, and because they just don't have clarity where they're going to head, right? So I think that's a really good point. And to the point of like, hey, this idea of I'm going to become a wealth creator. When you can get money to flow through your own hands back to you, if it's your money, somebody else's money, they're making it, but those flow of money start coming to you, that's a wealth creator. And I think to even a greater point, I'm going to say that's a legacy maker. Mm-hmm. Because you think about the true people of wealth. And again, I'm fortunate to know a couple of families that started banks. I didn't know them when they started the banks, but I know the grandkids of these people that started banks. And they had money when nobody else had money, and the flowing flows are. The legacies in those families are huge. Right? They're all working in the bank, or they all have the benefits of the bank. Their great grandpa, that's the guy that pointed out at the wall and say he started this thing. He is the founder of our family bank. But why can't that be David's? When your grandkids are looking up at the wall and go, That's the guy that started our family bank.
Yeah, especially when there's a desire for continuity, for longevity, long-term thinking, right? The investments may be a portion of that, of course, absolutely. The recognition that you can put an end and the recognition that all throughout you can add certainty because you have something backing you that you understand perfectly how it's going to work is what allows you to take a certain amount of risk with more confidence. I say this because I have to imagine in 2020, a lot of people that made investments in rental property or other things could not anticipate what happened during that year, and the difference between having creditors that they couldn't control, or the difference between having a source of cash that was not their own, and the people that had these investments and could navigate that period and alleviate financial pressure with certainty using an asset that you know exactly is going to perform this way this year, and next year is going to get better and better. Even if you stop that investment strategy, it's a way to also find peace of mind, which is something I have not found how to put in a balance sheet yet.
Yeah, it's hard to put a dollar sign to peace of mind. Right? And you make much better decisions when you don't have that pressure.
You're a tactician.
So there probably is a way to put a dollar sign to a peace of mind into like, hey, I own the strategy, or I'm not leveraged to Wells Fargo and they're knocking at the door. So I have to make quick decisions. I can make strategic decisions. And so there's definitely a dollar value to that just from the decision making standpoint.
Yeah.
Think about all of us have been in this position before where I owe money. And do I do something stupid? Probably. We always do. We're human beings, right?
Yeah.
And so, but now if you're the owner of that note and you're the beneficiary of that note to be able to go out and do something in a business style, it alleviates some pressure and allows you to make better decisions.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue to what I was suggesting in this topic 7 that we talked about today. The first two topics we just talked about, investments are an external conversations. I'm not the operator. I own these investments. They're performing a certain yield, whether I own or I lend, those two different positions. But what if this is an active role and I'm the operator? And what if it's a business? Now we're talking to all of you that have businesses in our community. How do I strengthen my ability to run this business with peace of mind, with certainty, to make the right decisions, to continue to grow and continue to operate that business properly? I think there's a conversation here for business owners that is really important. The moment you identify that you can establish certainty in your capital structure, in the ability to hold those dollars as inventory, you can then become strategic about how to deploy money in a business that will actually create growth. A lot of business owners take cash, put it on marketing without having an idea of what's going to return, put dollars in equipment. A lot of times we do this to reduce taxes or, all these decisions. But what if we can just zoom out, financing my marketing, my equipment, my vehicles, my payroll in this way? I'm going to stop losing the opportunity cost of those dollars, and I'm going to strengthen the ultimate result of the business over time. That is a conversation that a lot of business, basically what we're saying is, in addition to your business, add a banking business below it and integrate them together to strengthen the result of your business.
Yeah. The restaurateur that owns the means of production, that has the cattle farm, that has the hydroponic produce part of it, has the vineyard, that all supports his restaurant. You want to make sure all those businesses are profitable. But again, now the profit's flowing back to an entity that you're part of, right? Versus flowing to somebody else. And that's the real key. And all we're saying, the one thing that you should think about, because really, once you understand this, is the beauty of it. This is the easiest business to run, David. It requires the least overhead, the least amount of attention. You don't need to have, 300 employees to make this work. You don't, so it is truly the simplest business that once you integrate that in a layer of your business, it becomes the most profitable part of your business. So,
yeah. In addition to that, if you co-generate with the proper entities, it's not just one person, but you have an entire multi-billion-dollar organization giving you that certainty behind your business. So it's really important to recognize that there's that relationship. So we talked to business owners across the country about this. The Small Business Administration, it's a government agency that monitors, the SBA monitors performance of businesses across the country, tracks a list that explains the top 10 reasons why businesses go out of business in the United States. And you can imagine at the top of that line, cash flow is the bloodline of businesses. And a lot of businesses go down because cash flow is not there to support the continued operation. Absolutely. But the interesting thing we've identified is that it's not just the capital and the financial assets of a business, but the human capital of the business that also explains reasons 2 through 10. Everything else, it's about the humans of the business. Wait,
So what you're saying is that the number one reason why businesses fail is lack of cash flow.
correct.
Now, let's talk about the next 9 reasons why they fail. It's all human capitals. It's
Yes.
human behavior.
It's having the wrong operator. It's having the wrong exposure through a wrong strategy from marketing from your people. It's having employees that are key to the business leave or die or get injured. It's the fact that you don't have the ability to retain the top people producing revenue for your business. Maybe you don't have the ability to attract them even to the business. What if you don't have the right reward systems to create more productivity? All these things become part of creating a business that's performing with tough money mastery strategies. And in this conversation, we're talking about just like in the family conversation we had in the last episode, or your children, people that you call family, parents, whoever in your community that is close to you, they'll have needs for financing, and you will need to protect these people because losing them is a unimaginable loss. In your business, the same is true. These people that are operating with you, even if you're a solopreneur, you are that human capital. And if you expand that to other people you interact with, all these people are essential for the operation of the business. Then what if we could use the same asset, the same tough money principle strategy to protect our money and also to protect them themselves?
Yeah.
To attract, retain, reward, and protect the people in your life.
I think there's a really great conversation to be had there. And this obviously can be a one-on-one conversation, but again, this how we started the segment. Let's let our imagination run a little bit. And I'm going to take you to some conversation I had years ago with some business owners. And we were doing exactly this. They had some key employees that they wanted to retain. And again, if the person died or would die or leave the business, it would devastate the business. This one individual was generating 80% of the revenue, right? It's not unheard of in businesses, but they saw it as an expense. It's like, oh, we can't afford to solve that problem. We helped them identify the problem, and they go, well, we can't afford to solve that problem. What if we could solve that problem and allow you to use those dollars that's inside your policy and that policy that's covering that client to retain them? In the event that, if he wants to leave, we can say, we'll build a structure. You have to stay with us for at least the next 6 years. If he dies, because, people die, right? It's unfortunate. We see that in business where when people die, it just devastates a business, not just from a loss of revenue, but just a loss of continuity inside of a business. And sometimes when you got 30 or 40 days of liquidity, a disruption of continuity it ends the business, even though it's not the owner, right? And we can have that layer of banking, and this can be a source of dollars that we can use in that layer of banking along the way as well. So then by the time that person's ready, maybe wants to leave, retire, whatever it might be, we can send them off, say thank you, because now we've used it for other things to grow our business, to find other people. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be. It can be served doing all three things.
What if you have the knowledge and the understanding and the professionals in your life that can help you see more clearly? I invite people to suspend their disbelief in this conversation because the likelihood is that they have not been exposed to enough understanding to see this clearly. I'll summarize this with your permission, because I think there's a pattern here that we should recognize. What we're talking about is a 3-stage conversation by the time we get here to investments, to lending, even a business owner conversation. And it is this. The first part that people focus on, and it's natural, is how do I protect the dollars in my business? And there's a conversation there to say, adding a step, adding a process, a solution, a product here, right next to your investment strategy, adds the certainty that guarantees the protection to that money in addition to the activity. It's an asset. And whether it's a business or an investment, this is a wise decision every day of the week. Then to step number 2, we should remember, hey, the largest corporations in the country, GE, all these large businesses we see, I reference GE, I used to work for them, is when you realize they're paying the top 3% executives compensation in the future using life insurance products, and they're pushing the risk to the bottom 97 with products like 401ks and qualified plans for retirement, you start to realize that this idea of protecting money at the same time that you protect the capital, the human capital, the people in the business is really powerful.
Yeah.
Really powerful. And you can go and take a look at CEO compensations and go read K1s, and you'll see that in addition to the astronomical salaries these guys get paid for what they do, down the paper, you'll see other elements offered as deferred compensation, key man insurance, other things that are provided to them as benefits that the people don't talk about. At times, they are even larger and more powerful than the cash they get distributed itself. So this part here, what we're telling you is if you need to have a conversation with us about key man insurance and people that are essential for your business that you need to protect, please give us a call. If you need to have conversations about deferred compensation or ways to retain your people over time because they're essential for your business. And the interesting thing that you made me realize is when we ask people, what else did you miss from a protection of list? Business owners tend not to include themselves in that list, which is fascinating to me. So this third pillar is what happens at the business owner level itself. And these are the conversations about business succession and how am I going to sell my business or what happens if something happens to me or one of my partners. I can tell you, Wade and I have had conversations with business owners where the business is valued at millions of dollars. But if one of them, for God forbid, something happened to them and they had to liquidate the business because they had to make their spouse or their kids whole after they pass, the liquidation value of the business goes down to 4 or 5 figures. And it's shocking to tell people, hey, you could have gotten millions of dollars, but now that your partner died, you're entitled to $50,000, $100,000. That transfer of risk needs to happen so you can apply tough money principles for mastery.
And I think there's a really good point to be made there is like, who are you inviting into your financial board of directors? And what I mean by that, who's giving you the authority to say yes or no to anything you're going to do in your business? So what I mean by that is, this idea of how do I use my policy or how do I use access to cash or capital to either grow my business, strengthen my business, or preserve my business is really the conversation. And then the question is, who do we invite in our financial board of directors? Are we inviting the IRS into that? Are we inviting Jamie Dimon and Chase into that? Are we inviting a spouse of an ex-partner that passed away? Who are we inviting to that table to make decisions in our business? If you don't like the list that's currently there, then the question is, what are you doing? What can you do to filter who's coming to that table? And again, this is about the intentionality in having this conversation. Today, people are going to die. Last time I checked, it's still 100% certainty that people, the only variable we don't know about that is when. The point is, people are going to die. And if we don't know when, then the question is, how much risk are we willing to take? How much belief do you have in that my partner's not going to die and I'm not going to invite the IRS or his spouse or the bank into my life because of that event? And if you have 100% certainty, well, great. But my guess is that you don't have 100% certainty. If you don't have 100% certainty, then how do we transfer that out to somebody else?
That's the point of tough money masteries. That level of certainty increase comes from applying the right principles, the right ideas. Absolutely. Right. I think most business owners in America, especially small business owners, are carrying that human capital risk all along without knowing, without acknowledging it, because all we're focused on is cash flow. But what if you could solve for both?
Yeah. And I think that's the real key. What if you could solve for both? It could be just leaving. Great people leave great organizations for whatever reason, but what if we could retain those people? So again, it doesn't have to be death. But to your point, what if we could solve for both? And also now you're looking at it as an asset versus a liability. When you make those premium payments, if you understand what's really going on, you're going to say that is an asset I'm buying, not a liability.
Thank you for having me, by the way. And I just want to give a sneak peek to everyone that's going to follow this. The next conversation, we're going to talk about the relationship between your financial area and your personal self. Understanding how some of these financial decisions we make today, how some of these principles can solve for the main conversations we have with ourselves around our money. What happens if I'm pursuing retirement? What happens to my decisions around where I save for those later stages in life through qualified plans or some other vehicles? What happens in the investments I make today myself, like college education or some type of further professional education? Ultimately, I will have the need for financing every year moving forward until I'm no longer here. So could there be a better way to finance my annual expenses or my large purchases moving forward so I can have a relationship with money now, throughout my life, and in the future?
Yeah. I'm excited about that because again, it is an exciting conversation when you know that there are people out there that understand it, get this, and can solve that with one of the greatest products out there. And again, that's why we call it tough money mastery. It's like it takes a little time and education to get you where you need to be, but it is truly mastery. And once you have it, it doesn't leave you. That's the beauty.
So thank you again for having me. A pleasure.
All right, we're going to be having David come back to finish up our third part of this 3-part series. So thanks everybody for listening. I would encourage you to share this with people in your life that you love and that you want to share some great financial conversations with. Thank you so much, David, and we'll talk to you soon.
Grateful to have you tune in today. If you're ready to rethink your financial journey and take the next step, make sure to subscribe. Until next time, stay curious and stay in control.